He fought for his country. Now one disabled veteran shares his current fight to get the care he needs through the VA system. This is DC Breakdown. I'm Angela Ray. Let's get started.
Breaking through the rhetoric, breaking down the issues. From the nation's capital, this is DC Breakdown.
Getting VA care for a non-combat injury turned into a nightmare for one veteran. Benjamin Krause says he is not alone in how the VA system treats its patients. He joins us via Skype from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Benjamin, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to me about your time in the service. When were you in the service?
Sure. I was in the military from 1996 until 2001. Served in the Air Force. I was in the Mobility Command and then later in the Special Ops out of Europe.
And tell me, what happened? How did you get injured?
Sure. Well, I had a bunch of different injuries that compounded into a 100% permanent and total rating now. I had a combination of neurologic impacts from a head injury that I received not in combat, but while I was on active duty. And as a result of the head injury, I ended up with brain scarring, neck problems, disc issues, a neuropathy in my hands and in my feet, and other kinds of conditions that resulted from that.
So when you returned to the United States, you already had symptoms, or were you full-fledged by the time you came back? You were completely and totally disabled?
When I came back, I ended up with a 10% disability rating from the VA, but my condition itself was, with a few exceptions, relatively stable. So I should have been at that time rated at 100% permanent and total, but the VA ran their gamut of blocking and tackling to make sure that I didn't quite get the benefits that I deserved at that time.
Tell me, what did the VA do or didn't do?
Well, the VA, what the VA did to me and what they generally do to veterans across the board is that they treat you like an insurance company would treat somebody adjudicating a claim against a automobile accident. And so they look for any excuse that they can come up with to get out of compensating that person for money, again, as though they're an insurance company. And so in my situation, they took the path of least resistance, which was not properly evaluating my conditions, and then once they didn't properly evaluate my medical conditions, they then proceeded to adjudicate the claims and awarded me a 10% rating, which since that time in 2003, when I first got my first rating back, the VA had essentially dropped the ball so much so that I ended up with what are called clear and unmistakable errors within my claim. I think I had about 5 or 6, maybe it was about 5. That the VA made such a mistake that in looking at the issue later, any reasonable person would see that the VA made a mistake, and they then corrected the issue. But to get the correction, I had to go to law school to learn how to fight for myself and make sure that the VA was following their own laws.
So let me get this straight. You went into the Air Force, am I correct? And you decided you wanted to serve your country. And you served your country from the 90s into 2001, and you have an injury, you come home, you expect that the Veterans Administration, the Veterans Medical Unit will take care of you, and instead you're treated like the bald-headed stepchild.
Right. I would say that we were probably treated worse than criminals, really, because you don't even get the benefit of the doubt. The VA assumes that you're lying, and you have to prove to the VA that you're not.
But why is that? Why does the VA assume that a vet is lying about a traumatic brain injury, about, you know, not being able to move limbs? How can they take that position?
Well, they're not supposed to take that position. They just do. And they've had a culture, as we've known recently, especially with the headlines, they have a culture of corruption in the VA, generally speaking, that can't seem to get rooted out despite the most fervent efforts of reporters and lawmakers across this country. So the VA, how can they do it? They just do it. And the VA itself is, for most part, above the law. If you're a veteran, you can't take the VA into court like you would, for example, an insurance company that's adjudicating a bad faith insurance claim, which you could if it was Allstate or if it was State Farm. If it was a normal insurance company that was making the same decisions and ignoring their own policies, you could have a bad faith insurance claim. When it comes to the VA, you can't do anything. You are stuck with whatever they do. And even if the VA employee intentionally conducts themselves in a way that results in either misconduct or negligence, there are a few things that a veteran can really do to not only get their claim properly adjudicated, but to go after that individual, that employee that didn't follow their own laws, that essentially victimized the veteran. So there's really nothing you can do. And that's why VA can get away with it, because you can't sue the VA in normal court in the way that you would if it was an insurance company or another federal agency, because of statute 38 USC 511. And because of that little piece of magic, VA feels like it's above the law.
I'm just really upset, and I think you know that. When you returned in 2001, you had a head injury. Were you under the impression that the people at the VA didn't know how to handle head injuries? Because now traumatic brain injury, TBI, is considered to be the signature of those who were over in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting those wars, but you weren't. So you were sort of, you know, presaging all of that.
Right.
What happened?
Do you mean how did VA drop the ball so badly?
Well, why is it they didn't know how to deal with brain injuries back then?
I think that we are coming off of a culture of suck it up. And I think Sam has taken advantage of that, especially when it comes to soldiers. And it tells soldiers after an injury like that to suck it up, put your rucksack back on, and, you know, and march to the beat. And I hear stories, for example, from a lot of veterans, especially in Afghanistan, where the resources were not there, where veterans did suffer severe brain injury and other kinds of trauma. And because of where they were located, they weren't able to get medical attention, told to put on their rucksack, you know, and grab their gear and go, which, you know, one does for fight or flight, more or less. But when it comes to getting claims for that same veteran who put their stuff back on and, you know, was able to get away from the enemy, the VA will use the fact that they were able to put their rucksack on and to grab their gear and fight through a firefight as evidence that somehow the brain injury didn't occur.
Unacceptable. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Tell me, what are you hearing from vets about the way they may be treated or a relative might be treated if they criticize any aspect of their experience at the Veterans the hospital there, the VA hospital?
Yeah, great question. In fact, I just heard back from a lawyer yesterday where the attorney had told me that he strictly, I guess I would say, counsels veterans who are considering filing a lawsuit for malpractice against the Department of Veterans Affairs. He strictly counsels the veteran against doing that because of fear of reprisal within the system. And so when a veteran or a veteran family member speaks out against the VA when they do commit malpractice or some other kind of adverse event occurs, if the veteran stands up for themselves, they flag you. And there's been a practice across the VA to use what are called disruptive behavior committees to flag veterans through these kind of a secret process. It's not even something you would consider a due process through court or even through an informal administrative hearing where at least you know of what you're accused. There are many examples of veterans across this country where VA, if you complain, then denigrates you by filing a complaint that somehow you were disruptive in your behavior because you complained, essentially disrupted their day-to-day, so they're going to flag you. What the flag means is that it prevents you from getting health care in a timely manner. It requires you to go talk to their police when you go onto the property, and they escort you around. And, you know, God forbid you ever have an emergency and need to go there without an appointment because they'll try to arrest you.
What?
So, yeah, absolutely. And so attorneys now are starting to counsel veterans against suing the VA, against standing up for their rights and against standing up for themselves for fear that VA will flag you through these DBCs or through some other means. Supposedly there's 3 or 4 other kinds of flagging systems that VA uses that are off the table, where if one doctor knows that you happen to file a complaint against one of their buddies, they'll come after you. And so we have a situation where it's not only whistleblowers who need to be afraid for their jobs, veterans need to be afraid of their lives. And if they ever speak out, God forbid they don't have some other form of healthcare outside of the VA system, because the chances of reprisal in the VA system through these DBCs or some other flag are apparently quite high.
Well, obviously, this is part of the awful culture that needs to be changed. And this goes very deep. This runs very deep, because what a lot of vets are saying is, it took me forever to get in, but once I get in, I had great medical care. Well, that's not the story you're telling. And when this new guy, it looks like he's going to be confirmed without any issue, when this new guy comes in, he's got to hit the ground running, because the systemic problems are an embarrassment to this country, an embarrassment to the way we treat our veterans, people who are keeping us safe and making sure that our freedoms are intact. This is just unacceptable.
Absolutely. And let's hope that Congress is able to continue to hold VA's feet to the fire. The real problem here is that veterans don't have a voice. I don't care what Congress says. I don't care what VA says. Veterans don't have a voice. We don't have the ability to file suit. We don't have the ability, like a criminal would have, in filing suit against the VA when they intentionally harm you. We don't have that ability. In many instances, we have to go through checks and balances and wait for policies to change, but God forbid you go to court. And if you're lucky enough to have the facts lined up and a great attorney to make that happen, hopefully you have other health care lined up, because if you go back into the VA, they are going to get you.
They're going to get you. Benjamin Krause with DisabledVeterans.org, thank you so much for talking with us today. Thank you for your service, and thank you for being someone who's not taken any mess from the VA. You got your law degree, you're fighting for yourself, you're fighting for others. I just wish you total happiness, and you can come back anytime you want to talk to all of our viewers here on DC Breakdown.
Thank you so much.